Well, I'm Jim Clyburn, and I represent the 6th Congressional District of South Carolina. I am a big advocate for broadband, especially in rural communities, most especially because I believe that when it comes to the 21st century, broadband can be to this century what rural electrification was in the 20th century. And I often talk about a testimony that was given in a rural church down in Tennessee, when a man stood up one night and said, "Brothers and sisters, I want to tell you this. The greatest thing on earth is to have the love of God in your heart. And the next greatest thing is to have electricity in your house." I believe that for the 21st century, we must have broadband internet in every home. That is the only way for us to get health care effectively delivered to everybody. That's the only way for us to get our children adequately educated. Here in South Carolina, we're told that as a result of COVID-19, over 40,000 children had no contact with their educational experiences for the last half of the school year. And if it comes back, as many experts say that it will, in the fall of this year, those children could very well lose a second year of school. And then, what will the rest of their lives be like? So, to me, we've just got to make the commitment. It'll cost around $86 billion, I'm told, to build out the internet throughout the country. That's $86 billion worth spending, because it really is a big investment that will pay off tenfold if we do. So in my home state, in my congressional district, where 4 rural hospitals have been closed recently, where we don't have federally qualified community health centers with access to with everybody having access to them. We need to really fix this. I've seen it. I know what it does. I've sat in a doctor's office and watched the doctor diagnose a patient with diabetes 126 miles away. Do we want to make the greatness of this country accessible and affordable for all? That's what we've got to decide. I really feel very strongly about the Pledge of Allegiance that I used to recite every morning when I was growing up in a little town of Sumter, not far from here. It closes with liberty and justice for all. That's a vision for this country. And everything I try to do is designed to fulfill that country's vision, trying to achieve that as the order of the day. Our democracy is really teetering as we speak. The fact of the matter is, we are being challenged significantly. More and more people are now saying that this democracy is at a crossroads. So the fact is, this is not just a rural problem. This is a problem in community problem. This is an income problem. This is a problem for people based upon the zip codes that they live in. So that, to me, is what I try to do in talking with my colleagues. I've gotten significant bipartisan support for this broadband issue. We just, Congressman Upton from Michigan and I just introduced legislation to try to force the Federal Communications Commission to build out his rural internet stuff earlier than the 2-year timeline that they have. We think that in those states and communities where the mapping is already done, that we know exactly what the end is going to be based upon what their policies are. So if you got a state like South Carolina that's done its mapping, and it's really good mapping, the FCC ought to go on and let South Carolina have that $356 million. And the Rural Broadband Task Force, I've been told by more than one Republican that they're all in. So we ought to move forward. And so I would say to people that I would not be discouraged by the fact that things will run at a snail's pace over there in the Senate. I often think about 1964 Civil Rights Act. When that Civil Rights Act passed in 1964, everybody, including President Lyndon Johnson, thought that that was it for a while. No, it wasn't it for a while. If we deal with our infrastructure, not just roads and bridges, but as it relates to broadband, that's a big infrastructure issue. Housing ought to be an infrastructure issue. And if we do these things, build this infrastructure out, not only will we create jobs, but we'll create wealth and great educational experiences with broadband. I think it is a national priority right now. It hasn't been enunciated yet, but I think people have now decided that COVID-19 has revealed something that we've been running away from, and we can't run away from it any longer. I think that because it's not just in healthcare, but in education as well. I think that people now know that broadband can be one of the biggest economic drivers ever. You know, I always say that we can be no more, nor will we be any less than what our experiences allow us to be. And I would say to all of my constituents, I would say to any stakeholder, just imagine what it takes for you to feel that you've got access to all the amenities that one should have. And think about what it would take to provide that same access to your neighbors and anybody else with whom you come in contact. So I would ask people to just deal with that old golden rule that we talk so much about, but apply it to the communities. I think when we get people to see how they get something out of it, how their families get something out of it, how their communities get something out of it, they'll buy into it. That's why I'm convinced that we're going to do this broadband thing, and I'm convinced we're going to do it in very short order. One of the things that I've been pushing now since 2009, back when we were putting together the so-called Recovery Act, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the stimulus bill, I made it clear to all those involved that I feel very strongly that we continue to make the mistake when we are stimulating the economy. We make these investments without regards to how the current status of various communities are. That what we need to do is come up with a way of dealing with communities, not as silos, but as a part of the great big order. That I don't have to compete because I can't afford to compete. I can't hire these high-priced ranch riders because I don't have that kind of a tax base. So we ought to look for ways for these communities to automatically come into the arena for assistance. And it will be a tremendous educational tool, a great healthcare delivery mechanism. I think broadband has become a national issue. We just got to tell the country that it is.